edition of the Narrative Avengers series, Vote Early series. We have 18 days left until the election, 18 days and 11 hours, I was just told. So there's 18 days left for you to vote early or to make your plan to vote on election day. It's very important that we get out this year and cast our ballots and get our communities to turn out in force to protect our democracy and to fight for all the issues that matter to us. One of those issues that I think is the most important to me personally throughout my life and to so many of us in our community is education. This is the institutions of education touch all of our lives, all of our communities. We intersect in our schools, in our classrooms. We come together, we learn together how to build a better society. I remember reading Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed and came across this quote that I thought really summed up what education is all about. Of course, I just misplaced it. Here it is. He said, "Education is the practice of freedom. Education either functions as an instrument which is used to facilitate integration of the younger generation into the logic of the present system and bring about conformity, or it becomes the practice of freedom, the practice by which people deal critically and creatively with reality and discover how to participate in the transformation of their world." And today there's a struggle to control the future of education, to control the ability for our students to practice freedom, especially coming out of a pandemic, which has caused so many issues for teachers and students and so much disruption in the education of our children over the last couple of years, which has put so much stress on our young people, leading to a mental health crisis that's ongoing. As we're coming out of that, it's really important that we do everything we can to make sure that our teachers and our students and our schools have everything that they need to make sure that our young people can practice freedom. And that's really the question that we're dealing with today. So I'm really excited to be talking with three powerful leaders who are working every day to protect our children's future. First up, we have Cynthia Peoples from Honesty in Education, who is going to talk to us about how we can use our power, our votes to protect our kids this election cycle. So Cynthia, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us. So I wonder if you could introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about who you are and how you got involved with Honesty in Education.
Thank you so much, James. It's an honor to be in this space, and thank you for the invitation. My name is Cynthia Peoples, and I'm the founding director of Honesty for Ohio Education. Honesty is a nonpartisan statewide coalition that educates, advocates, and builds community around protecting honest education, around affirming identities, cultures, and lived experiences, protecting local control in education, and most importantly, protecting the safety and well-being of our students and our educators, because a lot of times we leave the educators out of this equation. And we do that across three lanes: at the State House, at the State Board of Education, and in our local school districts, because there is individual unique harm that is being imported into those spaces from some pretty extremist national leaders. I come into this work not voluntarily. I am a Korean American woman. I'm married to a Black man, and I'm raising three multicultural children in America. So I really don't have the privilege of not being involved in this work. This is our family's reality. This isn't a website, an award-winning book, or a class elective for us. And, as a mother, I've been fighting these education issues for the entirety of our children's experience in K-12 education, as well as mine and my husband's. And very recently, when the two first censorship bills, House Bill 322 and 327, hit our Ohio State House, that brought me from my local work to statewide work. There was a small group of us that came together via an email thread that started putting the Honesty Coalition together. And, a little more than a year later, here we are with more than 50 organizational state and national partners and hundreds of students and educators and just concerned Ohioans that are fighting for honest education and really fighting for the lives of our students and our educators right now.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, it's been really inspiring to watch y'all grow so quickly over the last year, and at such a critical point in our nation's sort of history. And at this moment, when education seems to be under attack from so many different angles. And one, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about some of the stuff that's been going on at the level of the state school board. I know a lot of folks I'm sure are familiar with their local school boards, if they're lucky enough to still have one. But not a lot of people are paying attention all the time to the state school board level. So I was wondering if you could share a little more about what's going on there and how y'all are intervening.
Yeah, first I'll take a broader look and then zero it in on what's happening at the State Board of Education, because it's important to understand the context. So right now there's this nationally coordinated political agenda to dismantle public education. And like I said, that's happening across 3 fronts nationally, not just here in Ohio at the State House, State Board, and our local school boards. And it really started as an effort to weaponize race with this manufactured crisis around critical race theory. They didn't get a lot of purchase because, newsflash, families want an honest education and, full accountability of our history. So since then, this effort has had to pivot to another point. So now this agenda is weaponizing identity and sexuality. And this is where we're finding a lot of these efforts coming in by ways of legislation in our state house, over 300 across the country, in fact, and resolutions that are being, peddled in state boards of education, which is where we're sitting at right now with our State Board of Education. So in September, one of our state board members, Brendan Shea, introduced a resolution that is called the Resolution to Support Parents, Schools, and Districts in Rejecting Harmful, Coercive, and Burdensome Gender Identity Policies. Key in on burdensome gender policies. So what this resolution is essentially doing is directing our over 600 public school districts to reject and disobey federal Title IX protections for our LGBTQ plus students. It's also citing what the lawsuit that was filed by Ohio Attorney General David Yost, as well as 21 other attorney generals across the state, to disregard that Title IX guidance. It requires our state superintendent to send a letter to all of our public school districts telling them to disregard and disobey that Title IX guidance, as well as directing the General Assembly to provide stopgap funding for any school districts that are disobeying that law and that are not receiving any federal funding because of that. It endorses requiring our school districts to out our LGBTQ plus students to their families, regardless of the harm and danger that would pose on our students. It's also regurgitating that harmful rhetoric around our educators and our students being predators, directing our General Assembly to pass Don't Say Gay legislation, banning our students from using restrooms that align with their identity, their gender identity, as well as banning them from athletic teams as well. So everything that's being directed in this resolution is what Title IX federal law is protecting our students from, that discrimination, that harm, that violence also, because we have to remember that some of this discrimination manifests itself in actual physical harm to our LGBTQ plus students. So this resolution is sitting on the table. It was introduced in September. There was testimony around it both in September and October. And now we just heard right before this call that the executive committee where this resolution got moved to is having a meeting on, get it, October 31st to further discuss this resolution. And there's a possible vote for this resolution to move out of executive committee back to the board's voting agenda. So we are immediately working to put out some information about that.
Yeah, thank you for doing that work of keeping tabs on all this stuff. It's interesting that you said how this sort of attack originally began with CRT, critical race theory
Right.
stuff, and has pivoted us in different ways to focusing on attacking our LGBTQ students. Uh, I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about, like, what do you think the motivation is, for this current attack on education? Is it do they really have particular policy goals, or is it are they just trying to undermine education more broadly, and using this as a way to open that?
Yeah, I mean, well, there are several threads to pull on here. I mean, first we have to remember that this most recent attack on public education, because this seems to be a conservative agenda regardless of the decade, but this most recent attack really started back in the summer of 2020, in response to the brutal murder of George Floyd, who's one of countless Black and brown Americans that were murdered at the hands of police. We saw in the summer of 2020, there was this massive sweeping demand for racial and social justice and accountability, not only of our police departments and law enforcement agencies, but our government and our institutions and our systems as well. And what happened in 2020 is that this wasn't only resting in our Black and brown communities, white businesses, predominantly white school districts were also demanding accountability and justice also. And this really shook the core of this white power imbalance that is sitting in these elected seats. So in response to this demand for education, information, and accountability, we saw this whole rash of voter suppression bills and pushes. We saw, this rash of censorship bills flooding our state houses for education and our state boards of education. We saw this rash of bills, around reproductive health and reproductive justice. And then, we also saw attacks on healthcare access and quality of healthcare as well. So, education being, part of that collateral damage. This is the undercurrent of all of this, aside from, keeping those elected leaders accountable for what they're doing and not doing. We're also seeing that this is a big push to divest funds and resources from public education to privatized education, which is not new. Like I said, this has been an undercurrent of a conservative agenda. But right now, this entire package right now is ultimately to force like a push out from public education into privatized education. And it's by creating this division and this fear of our educators about what they're teaching and what they're not teaching. It's perpetuating this othering of our educators and of our students who don't fit this white dominant narrative of, who people think that they should be. And it's creating this culture war that our students are sitting in the crosshairs of this. So we always have to remember that the student voice and the student experience is what we need to be prioritizing, no matter if we're in an election season or not. And let's take note of when this is happening as well. So these bills, these efforts started coming in wholesale around January of 2021. There are more than 42 states across the country now that have introduced or passed legislation censoring education, honest education around race, identity, and sexuality. And Ohio is no stranger to that. And this is an excellent vehicle for campaign points and campaign currency. And we're seeing so many of our conservative extremist legislators and candidates, using this as a banner to forward their own political agenda. I mean, shamefully, so many candidates right now are exploiting these culture wars to advance their own campaign. And, when you look at the timeline, that's what we're seeing. And that's why we're seeing it right now.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that context with people. So one question we've been asking everybody is, how would you explain your issue to a 7-year-old? And I think this is really important for all of us, progressives, policy wonks. but particularly as we're talking about education and talking to young people, how would you explain the work that y'all do to a 7-year-old?
Well, first, I'd say that our 7-year-olds are pretty sophisticated and emotionally intelligent. I'd say they have access to, they just operate at such a higher frequency than we ever did. So talking to a 7-year-old is, you really have to bring your game up these days. But I'd say that there are adults in the room that are trying really hard to erase their identities and their experiences from their classroom and from their communities because they don't want them to have a voice. And what I would say right now is that the adults, the students, the young adults, the community members, anyone that is able to vote needs to use their vote to vote elected leaders out who want to harm our students and our educators, vote them out of office. We are at a pivotal point right now. We are at the intersection of education and democracy. And education is the bedrock of a high functioning democracy. So they go hand in hand right now. So this attempt to erase our lived experiences, which are labeled as divisive concepts in these bills that are sitting in the State House, we ultimately have the control as to who is able to prioritize and who is able to direct what education looks like in Ohio. So, the short of it is there are people trying to erase people like me, people like you, James, our experiences out of the classroom. And we need to push back on that right now.
Cynthia, thank you so much for joining us today. I think that's a perfect note to end on. Before you go, though, is there any way that people can get involved with what you're doing? Where should people look y'all up?
Yeah, absolutely. So I highly encourage folks to head over to our website, which is honesty4ohioeducation.org. I also encourage folks to join our mailing list. We put out a lot of information, a lot of updates and action alerts on sometimes a daily basis around how people can get involved at the State House, State Board, and in their local school districts. And please pay attention to what's happening at the State Board of Education right now. What happens at the State Board trickles down to all of our local school districts. And we have 5 seats, 5 districts, 5 State Board of Education districts that are on the November ballot, districts 2, 3, 4, 9, and 10. Please, please, please head over to our website, learn about those districts, and vote up and down the ballot. The top is just as important as what's at the bottom of that ballot. So head over to our website. You can get all that information.
I appreciate you so much, Cynthia. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend, and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Take care. Okay, amazing. Next, we're going to be hearing from 2 leaders who are both, good, friends of mine. And we're going to be hearing from Scott DeMauro, who is president of the Ohio Education Association, Melissa Cropper, who is the president of Ohio Federation of Teachers. These are the 2 largest teacher unions in the state. So, hey, great to see both of y'all. And just so folks understand, unions, not just the teachers unions, but all unions are just so important for our progressive movement. Historically, they've been the most important movers of policy, securing a true middle class in this country, and defending that. And so it's really an honor to have y'all on here joining us. I don't know, maybe I'll pass it over to Melissa, to you first, since you're right next to me on my screen. Just want to introduce yourself to folks and a little bit about who you are.
Hello, yes, thank you. Glad to be on this today. It's a very important topic. Always glad to talk about education. I'm president of the Ohio Federation of Teachers and also secretary-treasurer at the Ohio AFL-CIO, so care very deeply about labor. I'm actually a library media specialist from Georgetown, Ohio, which is a small school in Brown County, about an hour east of Cincinnati. And we represent, the Ohio Federation of Teachers represents about 15,000 members across the state, with about 2/3 of our membership being located in Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Toledo areas, and then the rest of them scattered across the rural parts of the state. So very excited to be here and discuss education issues with you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Scott, what about you? Want to introduce yourself and share who you are with the folks?
Absolutely. Hey, James, good to see you. And hi, Melissa. Good to be with you today. My name's Scott Demaro. I'm a high school social studies teacher. Spent most of my career teaching in the Worthington schools just outside of Columbus. I am currently serving as president of OEA. The Ohio Education Association represents approximately 120,000 K-12, pre-K-12 teachers, education support professionals, plus higher education faculty and staff. We have retired members. We have aspiring educator members in college campuses all across the state. And, we're, as Melissa said, our reason for existing is to give educators a voice. There are a lot of decisions that are political decisions that get made all the time about education. And the only way that you're going to have influence is to join forces with other people and to, lock arm in arm with others. And there's strength in unity and there's strength in numbers. And we are facing a time right now where it's probably more important than ever before that we unite our voices. So really glad to be with you today.
Yeah, no, it's you're absolutely right. This time there's so much going on, and I know whenever I talk to any teacher, my sister-in-law is a teacher, I hear, just how stressful this last several years has been, coming through the pandemic, the last really just 2 decades, with testing and there's just how policies feel so confining to teachers and making it difficult for them to really do what they love. Which is support our kids in growing and becoming the best they can be. And so I was just wondering, what are some things that you're hearing from your members? Y'all are representing teachers all over the state. What are things you're hearing from your members about what's important to them, this election cycle? I don't know who wants to start. We can just see who goes
I'll
first.
start this time, Scott, and then I'll let you take the first stab next question, if that's okay. We're hearing that teachers want to get politics out of their classroom and just focus on doing what they love to do, which is to help each student find his or her potential, to unlock possibilities for them, allow them to pursue their goals and interests and become the best person they can be. And they're getting tired and frustrated of people interfering in that process. And getting tired and frustrated with the lack of respect that's being shown for the profession and the attempts to water down the profession and to take teachers' autonomy and teachers' voice out of the process, and which is leading to a real crisis in being able to find people to be in the classroom. So I don't think this is new. I think this is what we've been hearing from teachers for quite a while now, as you indicated, James, and the pandemic just kind of exacerbated that. And I think just kind of reinforced that everything that the system has been trying to impose on teachers, that teachers have been pushing back on for years. I think the pandemic showed that we were right. Those things don't really work. We weren't really connecting with students in a real way. And students now are demanding a different type of learning, and our teachers want to do a different type of teaching and learning, and the system is still gridlocking them in ways that aren't productive.
Yeah, and I would say that, the same thing. This year is interesting because this is the first year, and it's not really normal because we're still dealing with the impact of COVID. But it's the most normal start to the school year in a way that we've seen since 2019. And I think on one level, there's a certain amount of relief. I think with all the disruption that we saw starting in March of 2020, our members are really excited to be in the classroom, giving students the kind of in-person support that they need and deserve. But in a lot of ways, the dynamic has changed dramatically over the last 3 years. COVID is part of it, and COVID has put a lot of pressure on people, and people are feeling really, really stressed out. But as Melissa said, it is so much about this politicization, the politics being injected into the classroom, that people are feeling like, hey, I just want the freedom to do my job. And there are a lot of people out here who, and it has nothing to do with what's good for kids. Every single one of our members is doing the work that they're doing because they care deeply about the success of students. But there's a lot of people out there, including a lot of politicians, that want to just drive wedges. They're looking to drive wedges of distrust between schools and parents. They want to drive wedges of distrust within our school communities. You see school board meetings that are just out of control. And at the same time, all the inequities that we knew existed before just feel so much worse. And the challenges that students have, mental health challenges, and trying to support students and all the socialization needs that really were exacerbated, I think, by the pandemic, are all really coming to the fore. And so more than ever before, I'm just feeling people say they're stressed out.
Mhm.
And then another thing that's really stressing people out is that our schools are understaffed. There are 17,000 fewer people working in public education in Ohio now than there were in the fall of 2019. So that's a 6% drop in education and employment. And a lot of those are substitute teachers and bus drivers and cafeteria workers, as well as some unfilled classroom teaching positions. But for everybody who's in the system, everybody who's still working in those buildings, that just means more and more pressure on them. And so I think in a lot of ways, people are just feeling like they need relief, they need respect, as Melissa said, and they need support. At the beginning of the pandemic, educators were hailed as heroes. Look at all this great work you're doing. You're able to turn on a dime and continue learning, even though we're in the middle of a pandemic and we had to find new ways of using technology. But then politics got in the way, and a lot of our members are feeling like they're scapegoated for things that are completely out of their control. So I think now we're at a point, and especially with this election, to say we need people in office who are going to respect us, who are going to support us, who are going to give the resources that we need in order to have success with our kids.
And James, if I could just double down on that a little bit too, because again, I think we saw a lot of stuff being blamed on COVID, which COVID did have an impact on our classrooms, but there's something bigger than that at play here. And that is that children see how adults behave. Children see how some politicians have behaved. And we've have a generation of children now who are growing up in this atmosphere where we have some extremists saying that you don't have to listen to authority. There are no such things as facts. You make up your own rules, right? And that plays out in our classrooms. That's what our children are seeing from people who are leading the country at times, or were leading the country, and from adults that they're around all the time. And it plays out in our classrooms. And that's just an extra burden that our teachers are dealing with now. How do you deal with students who have been told you don't have to listen to authority? Right. So again, the way adults behave impacts what happens in our classrooms.
No, that's absolutely a valid point. Yeah. And we in general, I would say, I've always felt teachers have been blamed, scapegoated for so many social issues, and we can look back and we know the inequality, poverty, really determines so much of educational outcomes. But then we try to blame the teachers, and if we have better tests, well, maybe it'll do this and that and the third. When we just need to get to the root of what's producing different outcomes in educational attainment and all that. And one thing that always has amazed me about Ohio's educational system is that it's been unconstant. There's proven that we don't fund our schools constitutionally 30 years ago at this point. It's almost 30 years ago. And I know y'all have been doing a lot of work around trying to rectify that. So I was wondering if you could just say a little about what's going on with the effort to get better school funding in Ohio right now.
Yeah, so in the last budget, we saw some pretty significant progress. And this is where I do have hope, because we can at times work in a bipartisan manner with allies from both sides of the aisle who are focused on what's important for kids. And we were able to get a constitutional funding formula adopted as part of the state budget last year in 2021. We're in that 2-year budget cycle right now. The problem was, of course, that while the formula was worked into the budget, the dollars were not. And we got only about a third of the increase that was necessary to fully fund this formula funded in the last budget, with no commitment in terms of what was going to happen at the end of this budget cycle. So as we are looking ahead, and of course we go through this budget process every 2 years, we know that the number one priority for the next governor, for the next General Assembly, anybody who's continuing and anybody who's going to be new in those roles, has to be ensuring that every single student in the state of Ohio, regardless of their family background, their income, regardless of their identity, that they have the resources necessary in order to be successful. And so that means following through on the promise of the Fair School Funding Plan and making sure that we're using the resources. And there is an abundance of resources available right now. The state is sitting on piles of surplus cash. There's a lot of unspent federal relief dollars, and local communities are sitting on a lot of reserves when it comes to cash. So the money is there. We just need the political will to make sure that that guarantee is followed through on, and that all of these things that are being used to create division and mistrust are not used in a way to siphon those resources out of our public schools, because there is a coordinated nationwide effort to privatize our public education system. There is a lot of effort behind the so-called backpack bill, which would provide universal vouchers so that mass redistribution of tax dollars to private schools. We have to make sure that that does not happen, and make sure that our schools are fairly and fully funded.
I don't really have anything to add to that, James. I think Kelly answered that very thoroughly. I mean, we would totally agree with that. And again, making sure that public dollars are going to support public schools where 90% of our students attend, and that they're not being siphoned off for for private education that's outside of our system. So I totally agree with that. Yes.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, that was very well said, Scott. Yeah, I've been really impressed with y'all being able to secure what you were able to secure, and look forward to the struggle to make sure the money is actually there. But like you said, there is so much money sitting around right now. I was just reading this like $10 billion the state is sitting on in COVID funds right now. I mean, it's the money has been there. It's not, even without that additional money from the feds and stuff. So, like you said, once we make sure every kid, regardless of their background, actually has the resources to really pursue a meaningful education at all levels, I think it'll make a big difference. But I was just wondering if you could.
I'm sorry, I would just add that.
Oh,
I guess,
yeah, go for it.
when we're talking about what does it, part of this Fair School Funding Plan is when we're talking about what does it mean for a child to really have a good education. That does mean having some of those wraparound services included in schools. It does mean having those supports accessible to students in schools, and how are we making good use of all the resources that we have available in the community to achieve that purpose. So looking at how we bring behavioral health, mental health, physical health, all those resources into a school so that we can help children overcome those barriers that often do hinder their ability to learn. So as the legislature is talking about funding education, that has to be part of the thought process. What all is included in an education is not just having a teacher in the classroom, it's having all those other supports around our students also.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. Absolutely right. And that's one of the things I really appreciate about the direction of the labor movement that I've seen in Ohio, with the way that particularly the teachers movements, the teachers unions have shown up, is not just bargaining for just wages and benefits, but also really thinking about the broader good for the community, and how those wraparound services can really be brought in, and at the school level, but then also just the way that the union can show up for the broader community.
Right, and that happened. Our 4,500 members in Columbus City Schools were on strike early, at the very beginning of the school year this year, really on strike for the schools their students deserve in the city of Columbus. And that was all about reasonable class sizes and safe learning conditions, including, buildings across the district that are air conditioned and properly heated, and ensuring equitable access to art, music, and phys ed in every elementary school. Those are the kinds of things, but then also making sure that there's competitive salaries and benefits, because we are facing an educator shortage crisis in this state. Fewer people are choosing education as a major. More people are leaving early. And as I mentioned, we have fewer people employed in education overall. We have to deal with that in a very systemic way. We have to do that, address those issues, again, as a union at the local level, but then through policy at the state level as well. As Melissa alluded to earlier, by standing up against any efforts that are out there for gimmicky Band-Aid solutions that just simply water down quality. Our students deserve way more than that. And part of the importance of getting the Fair School funding plan enacted and fully funded is making sure that there are the resources to pay educators, teachers, school bus drivers, paraprofessionals across the board the kind of pay that they deserve, and give them the support that they need to be successful.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important that we push back on bills that get proposed, such as the most recent one we're seeing that would say that military people can become, veterans can become teachers, which again, we honor and respect the work that our veterans have done for our country. And thank God we have people who are willing to put their lives on the line for our country. That doesn't mean they're qualified to be school teachers, right? And again, the future of our country depends upon having qualified people in the classroom. And when we start lessening the requirements for what it takes to be in the classroom, now it's vets, which by the way, we already have a pathway for veterans to become teachers. So they're a valid pathway for veterans to become teachers. This just says that they don't actually have to take any of those classes or anything to become teachers. And once we start loosening those requirements, we see what's starting to happen in other states too, where it gets to a point where you don't have to have a license to be a teacher. I mean, that undermines our whole education system, which quite frankly undermines our whole system of democracy in this country. It's a real threat to the future of our country. So we have to be standing firm on what it takes to be a teacher, what it means to be a professional, and not find shortcuts to getting people in the classroom, but looking at the information that both our organizations have put out. The American Federation of Teachers and the National Education Association have both recently put out reports about why we have this shortage and what we can do to solve this shortage. And it's not making knee-jerk reaction solutions to the problem, but really looking deeply to solve the problem.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's like you said, the teacher shortage is exacerbating so many issues that are going on inside of buildings. And I just think about, I remember one of my favorite teachers in high school. She was brilliant, and when she told people, and she was in college, that she wanted to be a teacher, some of her professors were like, "Why do you want to be a teacher? Like, you could do so much stuff." And she was like, "Well, that's what I've always wanted to be." And like, who else do we want in our classrooms other than people that are really sharp and smart? And I always remember that anecdote. But it's rare to find those people that have that type of passion and commitment to the craft. And so you do need to make sure that it is well compensated. And I know so many teachers who are working 2 or 3 jobs basically for the same money they've been getting for a long time. So but we could talk for a long time about how stressful things can be. I'm wondering what has given y'all hope as you look to the future, for thinking about our education system and the threats to our democracy and all these things. But what's given y'all hope with this election season, or just as you look out the country?
First of all, our students always give me hope. I mean, the fact that we still have young people who question and who want to learn and who are more accepting than people that we've seen in the past gives me a lot of hope. The fact that we have good people stepping up to run for office gives me hope, but we just need to support those people and what they're doing. I could go on. There's a lot of things that give me hope, actually, and I think there's a lot of potential in Ohio that we need to tap into.
Yeah, one thing that gives me hope is our aspiring educators. We have members who are still in teacher preparation programs on college campuses, and they have that fire in the belly, and they are ready to go out and change the world, and that's exactly what we want and what we need. And our new educators, who are organizing in ways that we haven't seen in the past. I think we're seeing some generational changes. And one of the things about, younger generations of people younger than myself, I'll just leave it at that, is that there is a commitment to justice that I think really underlies the work that they do, which is really uplifting. Another thing that gives me hope is the fact that the labor movement has more public support now than at any time in the last 57 years, any time in my lifetime. And so when you see the kind of unity being built through labor organizing and successes like our members in Columbus had earlier this year, but in other ways as well. I think that sense that unity, along with a sense of purpose, along with just a real burning desire to make a difference for kids, is going to lead us forward. And we've survived challenges in the past. I have every confidence that we're going to survive this one too. OEA, by the way, is celebrating its 175th anniversary this year. And I think that's one of those things. It's a testament to the fact that for a long time, for generation after generation after generation, educators have stepped up to lead, and they use our organizations as a way of doing that. There's other ways of doing that too, but that leadership that I see among our members to really make a difference for kids gives me a tremendous amount of hope.
Right. And I want to jump in again. I'm sorry, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention, I know I watched part of Cynthia on this before we got on. I mean, it gives me hope that we have groups like Honesty for Highest Education, where lots and lots of people who are pushing back on this negative agenda that's being put out there, these culture wars. Anytime we see these bad bills come up in our state legislature, we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who submit testimony to push back on it. And that gives me hope that these culture wars have not been able to take a strong foothold in our schools, that people are pushing back. And so that gives me a lot of hope. And then as Scott said also, just the whole piece around organizing and the thought process people have about labor unions now is 71% favorability. I mean, we've won 6 union elections in the past year and have more coming up soon. Mm-hmm. People want to be a part of this movement. People understand what it means to be part of a union. And I think people are understanding more and more how the role that unions actually play in the education system. And that gives me hope also.
And real quick, and I know we're running out of time, but parents, despite all the stuff you hear and in the media about divided communities, overwhelmingly parents are demonstrating that they support and they trust their children's teachers. Children's Defense Fund did a comprehensive study on that over the summer. Over 90% of parents in Ohio across the spectrum said they trust their child's teacher to be teaching age-appropriate content, to be serving as a good role model for kids. That gives me hope too.
No, that gives me hope. That gives me hope for sure. All right, well, Scott, Melissa, it was great to have y'all on. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy days. I know, Melissa, you're traveling. I don't know where you're at right now, but safe travels back to Ohio whenever you get back home. And hopefully y'all have a great rest of your Thursday, good weekend and all that. I'm sure I'll be seeing you soon.
Thank you, James.
Thanks, James.
All right, cool. Yeah, next up, we're going to be hearing from a young person. I'm old enough now that I get to say that. We're going to be hearing from Aki Butler, who is with the Ohio Student Association. What's up, Aki? How are you doing?
What's up? I'm pretty good. All good.
All right, cool. Well, yeah, we are having a little bit of a connection issue. I think I can hear you fine. You were breaking up a little bit, but it's good to see you. I was wondering if you could maybe take a moment to introduce yourself, and who you are, and what the Ohio Student Association is, and how you got involved in OSA.
Um, uh, Connection issues, but my name is Aki Butler. Pronouns he, him. Work Association, we're a statewide multiracial grassroots org. And we do help students how to find issues that affect them on campus and within community, and do strategic. Actually, into work.
Okay.
Last year,
We can't, unfortunately, Aki, we can't hear you,
March
man.
last year when I on the States campus when I attended Kent State at the time. So, yeah. Oh,
All right. Sorry, Aki. Yeah, your connection is just not, unfortunately,
That's-
not working out. Was really looking forward to being able to talk with you. But no worries, we can find another time. We can find another time. But because I know the work that Aki's been doing and that OSA has been doing, they just finished up a fellowship program this summer, and I've been working on a couple different fronts at the federal and state level. So I was looking forward to hearing more about that. But such is life. So I guess we'll move to just kind of closing out. Thank you to everyone who joined in today to watch and learn about what's going on with the state of education in Ohio right now. Like I said at the beginning of the segment, we have only 18 days left until Election Day. That gives you 18 days to either vote early. Can we get that vote early graphic? There it is, vote early. Or to make your plan to go vote. I don't have any social media links, Lori, unfortunately, but you can go follow my organization, Ohio Voice, on Instagram and Facebook and whatnot. But like I said, thank you everyone for joining. It was really great to hear from Cynthia, from Scott and Melissa about the work that they're doing to protect education in the state. It's important that we all get out there and vote to make sure that that the future of our education system is protected, is fully funded, and that there are people in power who respect our children and will help them equip them with the tools they need to practice freedom. So thank you all for joining. We'll be back next week for another iteration of the Narrative Avengers. And we will be hearing from more leaders from across the state. So please stay tuned, tune in, and we'll talk to you all then.